Next, we're going to have Renee, and she's going to talk about adoption and adoption services and how you guys can get involved that way.
Hey, y'all. Like she said, my name is Renee Bergmen, and I work for a consulting firm called Christian Adoption Consultants. And my family is kind of a blend of biological children and adopted. There's my family right there. As you can see, my husband and I don't look anything like my son, so we are quite the poster for adoption. Our son, Keen, came home through adoption domestically here in the United States 6.5 years ago. And then our little girl, August, was biological. She was born 2.5 years ago. And the process to adopting was kind of a unique and long process for us. I would say that honestly, adoption began for me in my heart years before I was even married. I really felt a call to adoption. It was sort of a funny thing in my family that I always had African American Cabbage Patch dolls and had a desire for all the international Barbies and things like that. And so I knew from a very young age that I felt a call to adopt. I just had no idea what that story would look like. And when my husband and I met, he felt the same way. So when we started down the process of adoption, I had in my mind quite a misconception of what it looks like to adopt here in the United States. I really thought that if I was going to have a transracial family, it meant I was going to adopt internationally because that's where all the orphans were and that's who needed saving. And honestly, our faith in God just really did an amazing work in our lives to see that that was not the case. And in through some really unique channels of meeting some friends and family through our process of looking into adopting, we realized the incredible need here in the United States for adoption, and specifically in the African American community. There's very few families that are open to being a transracial family. And for us, it was just no question. So while that's not what I'm going to talk about, it is a big part of the adoption world, is people being willing and open to look different. And as you could see, our family, we bear a burden of people asking questions, and our son is getting older to where he hears a lot of those questions, many of them really beautiful and wonderful opportunities for us to educate and to bless people to know about adoption. A lot of times it's something that's stirring in people already, and it's such a blessing to me that my son is this picture for them to take the next step to ask questions. So that's kind of our story and how things came about. But I think it's important as you guys are in this process of figuring out, how do I approach my campus? How do I make a difference in my campus? There's a lot of misconceptions about adoption. One being that I already talked about, that domestic adoption is so necessary. And we are here talking about pro-life. And this is one of the most amazing choices that someone can make, is choosing life and saying yes to an unborn child, that I will sacrifice and walk through a pregnancy and choose a set of parents to come alongside me and parent my child. And so this is a great alternative. But some of those misconceptions are important to understand so that when you're talking about adoption, you have your mind sort of wrapped around the idea. The first one being that a child needs to be rescued. And I think that that's a difficult distinction when we're talking about the pro-life issue. My son didn't need rescuing, really, because as soon as I begin to view myself as the hero, and you view an adoptive family as a hero, it places the child in this ever-existing debt to their parents. I don't think any of us would agree that that's a great position for them to be in. And so having a correct perspective about what adoption is and isn't is so important for the child and for those that you're talking about considering adoption and placing a child for adoption. it really is more that you are saying yes to enter into a situation that is difficult, and there are a lot of stresses involved, and there's a lot of uncertainty in it. And a birth mother saying yes to sacrificing and admitting that she cannot parent a child. And the end result is that this child receives double the love. And so it's not a rescuing of the child, it's a coming together and acknowledging that this child is worth loving and worth birthing. The second misconception is that the child's being given away. I'm sure you guys have heard that term, or I am asked that. Why did your birth mother give away your son? If you could place yourself in that position, first and foremost, I think often of my son. He's getting to an age where he understands his story. We talk a ton about his birth story. He hears the questions that people ask us. If you can put yourself in the situation of a child being described as something that's given away, it's probably one of the most unloving things you could say. If you could think of yourself as a small child being talked about as something that was discardable, it's so painful for a child to hear that. And frankly, as a parent of an adopted child, it's like a knife to my heart to hear anyone talk about our birth mother, who I love, who made an incredible choice to talk about a child being given away. And although it's just a term, as we all know, as we're talking about pro-life issues, language is so important. And so addressing adoption, instead of talking about a child being given up for adoption or given away, saying that a birth mother chose life and a birth mother chose a plan for their child, an adoption plan. And that's such an important thing when you're talking with people about adoption and what their choices are. Because even in their mind, maybe you're talking with someone that's considering an abortion and you're trying to present other options. If you begin to use the language to give that child up, why is that any different than choosing to abort the baby? Because clearly there's no value for that child. But in saying you're making a choice of love to choose a family to raise them, it's altering their mindset. It's putting their mindset in a place of, no, you're right, I do have a choice to love this child and make a loving decision. And the third misconception I think is important is talking about openness in adoption and understanding what open adoptions are. For a lot of years, closed adoptions have been the standard for adoption because there's a misconception that someone that's placing their child for adoption and making that plan, that they're probably unstable, they're probably unsafe, and it's better for that child never to know them. And while you may find that a birth parent is unstable, and you may find that there are pieces of their life and choices that they're making are unsafe, there's an appropriate way to have an open relationship with a birth parent. But it's also wrong to think that all birth parents are unstable and are unsafe. You may be someone sitting in this room that you're in college and possibly find yourself pregnant and have no idea what to do. And you may not be an unstable and an unsafe person, but after counsel and guidance, you could make that choice of choosing to place your child. And for you, the movement and the change, or for any birth parent, this movement and change into openness and adoption is so positive for both the birth parent, the child, and the adoptive parents. And mainly knowing that the child was so dearly loved that a birth parent wants to know bits about them. So there's different levels to it. A lot of families enter into a semi-open adoption, and a semi-open adoption usually means that the agency is the in-between person. And so this may be something that you decide as the parents, that the adoptive parents decide, because there are some choices, life choices happening with the birth parent that maybe are not safe for your child to be around. And so the agency is an in-between of sending letters and photos, and the birth parent can send those back, and there's kind of an intermediate person between you. The other option is a fully open adoption. And a lot of people are really scared of fully open adoptions. It feels out of control. It feels like there could be a struggle for who the child loves more. There's just a lot that comes with thinking about an open adoption. But the families that I know and that I serve that are in fully open adoptions, where sometimes the birth parents see the child and the family on a weekly basis. Other times it's just for holidays or for the child's birthday or the birth parent's birthday. But the love that that child experiences from having a birth parent in their life and knowing their history, knowing where they come from, far and above, all studies show that that is the best for a child, even though it's scary. And so it is important for adoptive parents to be willing and open for that and know that there will be difficult pieces of it. But for my husband and I, being people of faith and trusting God, we know that he's the author of my son's life and what happens with him. And therefore, no relationship with a birth parent can steal the fact that he has called us to parent him. And so those are some of the things that we really encourage families in when it comes to openness and adoption. So those are some of the misconceptions I think that are important to kind of wrap your mind around. Think about language, placing a child for adoption. The child is not being given away. You're not rescuing a child. Openness is a positive thing. All of these misconceptions really help you be for adoption and for life. And then to know how it works. So sometimes people don't fully understand what domestic adoption is. And domestic means that the adoption happens here in the United States. The baby is born here, and the majority of the time the child is adopted from birth. Sometimes not. Sometimes they are adopted a little bit older. So there's domestic private, and then there's foster care. And I think we all have a little bit of a knowledge of foster care that the state's involved. Domestic private means that a family says yes to adoption, and they are approved by the state to have a home study saying that they're not crazy and that they can adopt. And then agencies, they send off their information and apply to different agencies. And those agencies have birth mothers that they are working with and providing care and counseling and medical assistance. And at that point, they write up the birth mother's situation, including all the information, everything that has happened in the pregnancy, even the things that are difficult with if there's been drug use or alcohol use or anything like that in the pregnancy. And that is sent on to a potential family, and a potential family says yes or no that they want to be presented. And then the birth mother receives profiles, which are books written by the adoptive family giving the story of their life. So pictures of their family, why they're choosing to adopt, what their values and life looks like. And the birth mother will receive multiple of these, which is very hard for adoptive parents because knowing that you may present time and time again to a potential birth mother. But the beautiful thing is that the birth mother has say in who raises their child, and that they get to have a sense of owning the decision to be able to look and learn about a family and see multiple and feel led to one particular family that they feel most comfortable with raising their child. And then from there, the agency helps the process of what ensues next. So at the hospital, them being there or being in for the birth or not in for the birth, and helping with the process of signing paperwork to say this child is now in care of the adoptive family. So that's kind of the ins and outs of how it works. So once you have that knowledge, what do you do with it? How do you get involved? How do you be an advocate for adoption? You are here being an advocate for life, and so this is one of the ways that you can advocate for life. Be pro-adoption. Have positive language around adoption. View it as a beautiful option, not the worst plan B option, or the option that is at least not abortion. Viewing it as something that is a loving act and a brave act from a birth mother. Sometimes birth fathers are involved, but not always. And that it's a loving act for an adoptive family to choose to come together with a woman and say yes to giving life to a child that may never get to experience this world if they never knew that this was an option and that it was a positive option. The next thing is to find an adoption agency near your campus. I highly doubt that any of you will go throughout your college career and not encounter someone that either questions they're pregnant and is looking for a wonderful resource like Brandy talked about, like Stanton Healthcare, or that is pregnant and is really confused and doesn't know what to do. And so knowing your resources, we've talked a ton, I've heard time and time again, know about centers that can help your friends. Also, know an adoption agency. Just find one in your area. Call them, ask them questions. Know who they are, have their information. If someone is considering that option, be willing to go with them. Be willing to walk in. That's a really scary first step for any potential birth mother to take, is to walk into an agency and say, I can't parent this life that's inside of me. That is a very nerve-wracking experience. And so you being someone that would be willing to go is just such a gift to someone. And finally, if you are a person of faith, praying for the person. Pray for them. If they're in that situation, it is not a situation to be taken lightly. It is not something that ends quickly, like an abortion. What Planned Parenthood oftentimes tries to sell us on, that it ends quickly. As we've seen, that is not the truth emotionally of what happens afterwards. But a pregnancy is a long process. So praying for them that they would have strength to endure a really difficult decision and a really difficult time in life. Pregnancy is difficult even if you're not choosing adoption. But to place that on top of a very emotional time in your life is difficult. So prayer is huge. And then pray that you would be a safe individual for someone to come to. I think above all, when it comes to pro-life issues, being someone that is safe, and we heard a couple talks ago in the way that our tone and the way that we approach people and the way in which we have the conversation, that we're calm and collected. It's the same in this. Someone comes and says, I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. Not being shocked, not being overwhelmed and feeling like you don't know what to do either, but being a safe person, being a person that feels like you can calmly and gently walk with them through the process. So that is all I have to say about adoption. I think we are going to be opening up to questions. I don't know where. Is that true? Brandy, are you coming back up for questions as well? I think so. Okay, so Brandy or you can ask any questions to us regarding Stanton and regarding adoption. Hold on, I'll wait till Brandy gets up here. Go ahead. Yes, so we actually really preferred an open adoption. And interestingly enough, we had said no multiple times to situations that were closed or semi-closed, but God had different plans. And we actually matched with a birth mother that wanted a closed adoption. And we just really prayed when we went into the situation, and we ended up getting to stay at the hospital with her, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences of our lives. And after her getting to know us, she actually changed paperwork to semi-open. So she really needed that boundary. So we send pictures and letters often, and we pray that someday that she'll want to have more contact with us, and we're always open to that. Go ahead. Well, if they do sign closed, it's a little more difficult, and that was something that we really prayed that she would change, because if legally it was closed, you have to involve a judge. If it's semi-open, it's more an understanding between you and the birth mother that she wants a little more distance. That's usually the case, but she can choose to make it more open if she wants to in the future without having to go through the courts and change things. Yes.
I don't know what your sorry. What was, I know that some of the restrictions here in California have dealt with, funding for people who want to adopt. It's around 20,000 plus to adopt a child right now in many situations. What was your situation, or how can we get it down, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a really difficult piece. I think it's the conversation that I have most often is the cost of adoption, and it is very expensive. The difficult piece is that agencies, they work tirelessly to help families, and so paying employees costs money. So that's a lot of it. And then on top of it, you pay birth mother fees. So you're providing money for them once you've entered in a contractual agreement that you're going to adopt her child. You're helping pay bills and medical costs and whatnot. So some of it is unavoidable. And one of the ways that we've really tried to go forth and help families is, number one, there's tons of grants. Amazing grants where people are just dying to give money to families. They just have to be willing to fill out the information. So actually the organization I work for, that's a big part of my job, is that I help families find those grants, know which ones fit their situation, apply for them, and then fundraising. My husband and I, we used social media and we asked friends and family, would you come alongside us to bring a child home into our family? And you may not be called to adopt, but you can be called to help another family adopt and be that the church's hands and feet. And our story was insane. We got a call and were matched with our birth mom, and she went into labor early, and we were given $35,000 in 20 hours. Of random individuals just giving and people sharing the story, and this child is being born. Please help them come into the arms of the Bergmans. So it is a big issue, but it's not unattainable. It just takes some work, Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a two-part question
Okay.
for Brandy. One, do you have medical background? And if not, how did you come about to, be a CEO of basically a company that you need that? I don't know. I think that's kind of really interesting. I'm interested in medical, but maybe not. Then go for it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a medical background. I am an entrepreneur type of a person. My dad and my grandfather both ran and owned businesses, and so I grew up working in their businesses, and so I have an understanding of business and how things work and all of that kind of thing. Most importantly is that I'm a very passionate pro-life activist, and motivated by prayer and driven by what I saw was a need in our own community. And so when you kind of combine that passion with a basic skill set of understanding business, that's sort of how it all came together. But what I bring on board medical people. So we have a medical director who's a doctor. She's amazing. She does women's care and family practice, and so she's our medical director. And then we have a radiologist that oversees our ultrasound department. We have only licensed RDMS sonographers that do our ultrasound imaging, and then we have nurses that do our client advocacy and counseling, and all the other parts of our wellness care, and then trained client advocates. So we've actually built in Stanton a medical clinic that has better medical covering than our local Planned Parenthood. And so I'm proud of that, and that we've raised the standard of what women really, really deserve. So that was a great question.
So, you had said that the new Stanton face-off against the Planned Parenthood was in Boise, correct?
Correct.
So, do you have a place where we can get notifications on where and when the opening would be?
Yes, yeah, you can go to our website, thestantonproject.org, stantonproject.org, and we also have a Facebook presence, and yeah, we'll be giving updates. It'll probably be a year until we have the grand opening, except, once we break ground and start to build, which we're hoping is soon, it'll take probably about 8 months to build, which is what our builder said. Of course, usually with construction, things take a little bit longer. That's sort of the typical thing. But let's just pray that it moves even faster than expected, right? Yeah, so go to thestantonproject.org and you can get updates from us and friend us on Facebook. I think there's somebody back there that has a question.
Hi there. So I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but with the adoption agency, so if you have a mom that, a birth mother that kind of decides last minute that she wants to pull through with an adoption, how quickly do you match them with a parent? And if not, what are the consequences of that?
Yes, it's actually pretty common for birth mothers to make a decision at the end of the pregnancy. So that's something the agencies deal with on a regular basis, and they're able to process everything for her and help her get some medical care, usually within a few days. And then at that point, depending on how close they are to their due date, I mean, we definitely see quite a few birth mothers that come through that are about to give birth, like within the next few days. They have all the families that are saying yes to adoption, they have all their profiles, and so they're able to even go to the hospital while she's in labor and have her look at them and say yes. And all of the families that I work with know you may get a call at last minute and have to hop on a plane and get there within 24 hours. So things can move very quickly. I think that's such a great question, because a lot of times people think that this process happens way back here, and sometimes it does. Sometimes it happens when getting pregnant occurs. But a lot of times it happens like midway, all the way towards the end. And there's a lot of fear that if they hadn't already made that choice, that it's too late. And it's just not. Even if they're in the hospital, most hospitals now have someone that they can speak to help find an adoption agency in the area.
And I think this will be our last question.
I have some students who ask about adoptions, statistics, how many children go unadopted, how many children are waiting for homes and families within the U.S.?
I don't have exact numbers, but I will tell you that there are not many mothers who are choosing adoption that we can't find a family for. There are a lot of families in the U.S., especially in the last 10 years, that adoption has made this huge movement in a positive light, that it's not just an option for couples that can't conceive, but that it's a beautiful way to step into the difficulty of a situation of a birth mother. And so statistically, I don't know how many children are out there for adoption. When it comes to private domestic adoption, it's very rare that we can't find a family unless there's some extenuating circumstances with the child. Oftentimes we have to really reach deep if the child has severe special needs or possibly they won't live very long. But even that, I see tons of families willing to rise up. Now, it's different with foster care. So there's a difference. Foster care is through the state, and you can't just say, go to the state and get approved to be a foster parent and adopt like that, because the process is different. It's about reunification, and if reunification can't occur, then they're placed for adoption. So there are a lot more children in foster care that are waiting because it's a different scenario. All right, I think that's all. Thank you.